Indian Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi took a proverbial pit stop en route his destination to Brazil, where the upcoming G20 summit is going to take place. Last year, it took place in New Delhi, if you remember. And of course, it becomes imperative to discuss the India Nigeria relations in lieu of its importance. Normally, we consider Africa as a dark continent, as a backward continent, but it has a deep rooted history of exorbitant imperialism, of course, obviously by the European conquistadors, European imperialists. So, a lot of countries like Germany, Britain, France, Spain, they came and conquered different territories, and accordingly, they marked the haphazard boundaries that constitute Africa's countries today. So, Mr. Narendra Modi met the president of Nigeria, Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who conferred Mr. Modi with Nigeria's second highest national award, that is the Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger. So, all these words have meaning, obviously. So, Mr. Modi is going to attend the summit, Mr. Jinping is going to be there, and Xi Jinping, not only India Nigeria relations, but how China is attempting to extend its influence through trade and investment and development in the African continent. That is to be studied on the sidelines of G20. We are going to do some mapping. G20 I have discussed in previous lectures before. Trade and investment, the relations not only between India and China, India and Nigeria, but also China and Africa, and transport also. Very interesting. We'll understand via maps. So, first and foremost, we aim to locate Nigeria on the world map. Again, geography is very important. So, Nigeria, as you can see here, is a West African country. It is surrounded by Benin in the west, Niger. It is actually pronounced as Niger because Niger, this country was initially under the French occupation. Nigeria was under the influence of British. And to the northeast, we have Chad, and to the southeast, we have Cameroon. So, some important countries, some very important cities which you might or might not have heard, which we'll be mentioning and discussing in the lecture as well. So, this is Lagos, the largest city of Nigeria. It was initially the capital of Nigeria. Now the capital of city is Abuja. Okay. So if you remember the NCRT's pre-2000 in the 1990s, so there you will find Lagos being mentioned as the capital of Nigeria. Then Benin City is important. Wari, Port Harcourt, very important. Enugu. So these are the important cities. This Kaduna also is an important city. Okay. And the most important river you can see here, this Blue River. This Blue River, which is flowing. So this Blue River you can follow the Niger River. It originates from the Guinea Highlands, and then it drains into the Gulf of Guinea, or you can say the Atlantic Ocean. Fine. So these are the important features. And if I show you the satellite imagery, then you can see it is also very interesting. So satellite imagery, we can see that Nigeria, the lower part lies in the rainforest region. It is very dense. Rainforest is there because this area is relatively nearer to the equator. And the northern part lies in the Sahel region. Sahel region is a transition region, semi arid region, which mark a boundary between the forested region, the savanna region, and this Sahara Desert overall. Okay, so this is the interesting part. Now, let's get back to our agenda. First, before discussing the India Nigeria relations, we are going to discuss the importance of Nigeria itself as an African nation. Okay. So this is Nigeria, as we have discussed already. It is the most populous country in Africa. It is the fastest growing economy in Africa. It has the third largest manufacturing sector amongst the African countries, and that is why it is known as the giant of Africa, owing to its large population and fast growing economy. So, the population of Nigeria is around 230 million people currently. Okay, and some more interesting of around 250 ethnic groups speaking over 500 different languages. Again, don't confuse the ethnic groups with the religious groups. So we have the primary ethnic groups, the Hausa Fulani. I'll also show you a diagram. Then we have Yarobo. Okay, so these are the primary groups. We'll discuss via diagram. Then it is an important member of the African Union, which is a very important group of the 55 member states, 55 countries of Africa promoting the African unity, economic development strategy, and so on. Even when Prime Minister Modi went and met Mr. Tinubu, so he discussed the primary agenda was to deal with separatist tendencies, extremism, economic development, and whatnot. And AU also became the G20 member. It acquired G20 membership when Nigeria attended. Although Nigeria is not a member of G20, when Prime Minister Modi met, so during last year's G20 summit, it acquired its membership. So it is a powerhouse. It is not possible to neglect it. Fine. So this is just pay attention to some of the interesting aspects. I will just mark. So this was the population trend in 1950, 2023, and 2100. Okay, so you can see 1950 China was the most populated country. 2023 India has overtaken. Nigeria is the sixth largest, or sixth most populous country in the world after Indonesia, Pakistan. So you can see, and further till to 2100, because it is in the state of rapidly expanding population. So it is going to be third in the future by 2100. Just an important fact: experts have estimated that India's highest population, India will reach its highest population by the 2060s to the extent of 1.7 billion. Just an interesting fact. After that, like other countries, advanced countries, you can see Here, the European countries are nowhere to be seen. This Germany, Russia is both a Eurasian nation. So these European countries, the yellow ones are nowhere to be seen. Only the Asian ones here, the Asian ones, some the American, North American, South American, and primarily the African ones. They will hold the share in the future. So just like in the 2060s, India, like other advanced countries like Japan, like China is experiencing, it will experience peak of the population, and then the population will start declining. The absolute number. And the major ethnic groups. So we have discussed this Hausa and Fulani, Yoruba, and Igbo. So these constitute around 60 to 65% of the total population. These are not religious groups, these are ethno-linguistic groups. When we talk about population, so for example, Hausa and Fulani, 99% of this ethno-linguistic group are Muslims. Then when we go towards the south, like we discussed this Igbo, so majority of the people belonging to this ethno-linguistic group, they follow Christianity, and Yoruba, they are a mixture of both Christianity and Islam. There is another very important religion which is followed in Africa, which is known as animism. Very important if you have studied the NCRTs or basic. It is the worship of nature. So you see Africa, the countries are also. And overall, if we see the religious division of Nigeria, it is almost divided. Half the population are follow Christianity, and almost half the population follow Islam. So multi-ethnic, multi. There are a lot of separatist tendencies also. So we'll discuss in brief about that also. So we'll come resources we have to discuss when we discuss the geography. So how Nigeria is developing, what makes it the fastest growing economy. So primary resources, petroleum. Nigeria is a member of OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Not only that, it is a member of OIC, Organization for Islamic Cooperation. Then it is a member of United Nations. It is a member of the Commonwealth. It is the member of the Commonwealth, and it was also part of the non-aligned movement. Okay, so petroleum is found. Now, if we want to mark the area, so basically the Niger Delta. The petroleum resource is formed in the shallow oceanic water, so Niger Delta offshore. The onshore, we have discussed some places like Wari, in Port Harcourt. So these are some of the important areas for petroleum. Then apart from that, it has coal, reserves of coal. It is known as the storehouse of oil palm. Some amount of cocoa is also there. Then cotton is also grown in, and there is a special material, columbite. Columbite is basically an iron bearing mineral which is associated with tin. Okay, so these are the primary. This petroleum, as we discussed, petroleum is the primary product that generates revenue for the government and foreign exchange. Okay, then very important, some of the problems faced by domestic problems faced by Nigeria, Boko Haram, and an Islamist insurgent group, which is primarily functional in the northeast part of Nigeria. Fine. And there is also a region Biafra in the southeastern part. We discussed the Igbo region. So Biafra is a region in the southeastern part which has separatist tendencies. Then there is unrest in the Niger Delta also. Various ethno-linguistic groups, they come into conflict with each other. So these are Very interesting facts. Fine. Now we come to India Nigeria relations. So, what all has happened? So, first of all, this was the first visit of India's prime minister, of an Indian prime minister in 17 years. So, previous to that, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited Nigeria as prime minister in 2007, and the formal ties they started 1958, 2 years before Nigeria gained its independence in 1960s. So India was a proponent of decolonization. India had already achieved its independence, and the decolonization tendency, this wave of decolonization sentiments, were spanning all over the world during this period. Then, after independence, India has contributed to capacity building, to development of institutions. The best example is the National Defense Academy, which India helped develop in Kaduna. We have discussed one of the important cities in Nigeria. Then, Navy War College. This is Port Harcourt. Okay. What else? Nigeria has a 600,000 strong Indian expatriate community, which is the largest amongst the West African nations. Then 200 Indian companies have provided investments of to the tune of $27 billion in Nigeria. In fact, these companies are the second largest employers of the Nigerian people after the Nigerian federal government itself. Then $100 billion of concessional loans, and of course the capacity building measures. And last but not the least, it wants not only to counter China, Nigeria is a pivotal force. India wants to utilize its friendship, its economic development, the cultural relationship with Nigeria to pose a counter force to China. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi also referred to an African saying that a friend is one who shares, with whom you can share a path with. Okay, same path with. So it is very important. Then we come to how China is increasing its influence in Africa. So this map you might have seen. So this is the revival of the China aims to revive the old Silk Route via land and develop this maritime Silk Route in order to expand its influence. Okay, so here you can see in Africa also, it this place Nairobi in Kenya. So it wants to develop ports, provide investments. Recently, you might have heard of Hambantota port, which defaulted on its loans. So if we discuss in brief China, so apart from the components, the raw materials, like India is also looking for components, minerals or materials, raw materials from Nigeria in order to build its electric vehicles. Similarly, the tune of trade, Africa is the largest trading partner of China with trade to the tune of $200 billion. Then it has spent $2 trillion, $2 trillion and $300 billion of investment in developing the trade ties, this Belt and Road initiative with Africa since 2015. Okay, then what else is the aim of China? That China presents itself as a developing nation, presents itself as a developing nation. So it appeals to the developing nations of Africa as well. And why the Chinese funds are so appealing or so lucrative to the African countries? Because IMF and World Bank, which are the primary providers of the developmental loans to countries all over the world, China doesn't have prior strict preconditions, because we know that in a lot of countries, especially West African countries, you might have heard of several coup d'etat, where the military commanders have displaced the ruling governments. There have been human right violations. So this puts a restriction on the loans which can be derived from organizations such as International Monetary Fund and World Bank. But China itself has suffered from the Western imperialism tendencies, although it was not a particular colony of any European nation, but it presents itself as an anti imperialist entity. One important thing, the relations with China, it started during the 1950s. Like India, China also favored the decolonization of the countries of Africa. And in 1970s, it extended its influence to such an extent that it was able to rally the African nations to displace Taiwan as a representative at the global forums. So it has the good economic relations, diplomatic relations with all countries except this little country. This this is Eswatini, primarily previously known as Switzerland. Swaziland. Okay, so this Eswatini, Lesotho, these are countries within the larger country of South Africa. Okay, so this is despite the fact that countries have defaulted on loans. We were discussing about, if we discuss the concerns, so if we discuss the concerns of taking funding and expanding trade and investment relations with China, so I had mentioned this Hambantota port. So Hambantota port was developed with the heavy assistance in Sri Lanka, heavy assistance from China. But now, since Sri Lanka was unable to pay its debt or dues, it has been leased to, the majority stake has been leased to a Chinese company. Okay, so this, it has been accused of following a debt trap diplomacy by, so we say that China extends heavy investment debt like it has done in Pakistan in this for the China-Pakistan economic corridor also, but all obviously China, it has to emphasize otherwise. And then this is trade investments relations we have majorly discussed. So basically, I showed you the diagram of, it has also helped build the Trans-African Railway Network. So some countries I'm going to mention here. So this is Tanzania, this is Zambia, this is DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and this is Angola. Now how it is, so in 19, the Trans-African Railway, China helped in developing starting from the 1975. So there are some important ports you might have heard. This port is Dar es Salaam, also an important from the context of China's maritime belt, Silk Route initiative. This is Bogamayo port under development, again in Tanzania. There is an important port in Kenya known as Mombasa. Okay, so this Trans-African, African Railway, which has already been established, it runs from Dar es Salaam, then through Zambia, then DRC, and then all the way there is a port again here, the Libota port in Angola. So this railway link, also known as the Tazara Railway from Tanzania, from the derived from the initial letters Tanzania and Zambia railways. It was developed in 1975, and this rest of this part of the railway, also known as the Benguela Railway, was completed with the assistance of China in 2014. So this is an important development, interesting development also. And presently, Kenya also is looking forward for Chinese assistance to develop its gauge railways. So it is also a cause of concern not only for the whole world, including India, but South Africa also, which is a major trading partner, investment partner in a lot of African countries. You can see here we have the Atlantic Ocean, here we have the Indian Ocean, here we have India. So it is the African countries are a major component, major power players in the Indian Ocean region as well. That is why again India. And then we have this, the Suez Canal, the trading networks open in 1869. So this is also important. So this is part of Egypt. Mhm. So finally, in the agenda, G20 nations we have discussed. Okay, so they form a major voice of the global South. It helps the developing nations to emphasize their voices at the global forum. So as an interesting exercise, we'll just try and mark the important nations included in the G20. So G20, an easy way to remember is start with the G7. Then we go to the erstwhile G8 and then include 12 other countries. So if we consider the G7 nations, so we have US. This is also, it has multiple territories. This is Hawaii. So it multiple territories of US we have in various oceans, Pacific, Atlantic. We are not going to discuss that. Then we have Canada. This is also territories of Canada. This is Greenland. This is part of Denmark. Fine. Then we have France. We have Germany. We have Italy. We have UK. Then we have Japan. Primarily four islands. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these are the seven G7 countries. Then we can include Russia, which forms the G8. Then we can include the rest of the 12 countries. Very interesting. Just if you observe the map carefully, you can remember. So we have Mexico, we have Brazil, we have Argentina. Okay, in Africa, we have South Africa. Then we have Saudi Arabia. In Asia, we have Turkey. This small part lies in the continent of Europe also. Then we have India. Then we have China. We have Indonesia. These are multiple islands, Bali, Sulawesi, this part of Borneo, Kalimantan Island, and this part of Papua New Guinea Western. This is known as Irian Jaya. Fine. And we have Australia. We have South Korea. Okay, so these are total 11. We are missing out one. So the 11th part is the European Union. Okay, so this is how again Xi Jinping is going to meet Prime Minister Modi. But again, India is now become well versed with how to manage the various affairs of the countries, disengage with the conflict-ridden countries, and so on. So this is all about today's lecture. I hope you like this session. So till we meet again next time, Jai Hind.